The wonderful thing about RPGs is that sometimes you get these incredible, amazing moments where your story and a player's actions mesh together just right to make a moment that gives you chills when you set them up for something and they knock it out of the park with the perfect choice at the perfect time. This is a story about one of those moments. Before I can get to this perfect moment, I need to lay some groundwork. I was DMing this 5e campaign called Torchbearers that was set in this post-apocalyptic water world filled with pirates. Like Wind Waker. The entire campaign was a Wind Waker knockoff, except for the parts that were Pirates of the Caribbean knockoffs. DM steal, okay? The PCs in this campaign were a group of adventurers sailing around a part of this massive ocean called the IRC as part of this grand quest about creating a portal network and fighting an ancient fire god that I'll probably explain in a different video. The important thing for this story is that the group contained a pair of twins, Ren and Ripley Matarasi, a ranger and paladin respectively. Now, Ripley's player had to drop out after 3 sessions, which, I mean, it sucks, but it's just something you have to be prepared for when you're DMing. Life comes first. Besides, I have never been in a campaign where that didn't happen. Normally, when a player leaves, I figure out some way to have their character leave the group, but the problem was, Ren and Ripley's players had built their characters together and established that these two were inseparable, that they had never been apart, and would never just abandon each other to go off be an NPC somewhere. And this left me with a conundrum, because I had to get rid of this character, but I couldn't have her leave of her own volition. And I couldn't kill her off because I, as a rule, don't kill off the characters of players who leave. It feels spiteful and it makes it complicated if they ever come back. But then, this perfect, evil idea popped into my head. And I probably did like the Grinch smile or some shit. So anyway, the party was sailing around and they see this massive storm on the horizon. A storm that their captain can sense is magic in some way. They follow the storm to a small town called Prosper, and Prosper is absolutely destroyed. Buildings are torn apart, there's massive flooding, people are running around screaming. The town was under siege by pirates, who are loading crates onto their ship. Albin, the party's storm sorcerer captain, rushed into battle and cast the spell Lightning Bolt. The bolt burst from his fingers, piercing through the pirates and the crates they were carrying. And I, knowing what was in those crates, decided quickly to fudge some numbers to keep a player from accidentally killing a dozen children. Children have at least 15 hit points, right? Right? So anyway, the party fought through wave after wave of pirates. Partway through the battle, they ran into a squad of soldiers led by a guy named Captain James. The soldiers worked for the Rubicon Navy, a loose government that ruled over a few towns in the IRC. This isn't important, I'm probably gonna do a sequel to this video, and you need to understand the world. Anyway, the party teamed up with the Navy and they chased down an escaping ship and saved all the children. Well, almost. They interrogated the lieutenant in charge of the pirates and he revealed that he worked for the ghost pirate, Quincy Mortimer, who Captain James explained was this terrible pirate lord who had been killing people in the IRC for decades, going from town to town destroying everything as part of an endless, brutal reign of terror. As the captured lieutenant explained, Mortimer had come to Prosper because he'd heard of a child possessing storm magic, and asked his minions to capture all of the children in the village and bring them to his ship, the Rigor Mortis. Cool fucking ship name. Best part of this campaign was naming boats. By the time the party had gotten to the lieutenant, he'd already delivered the right child, a goblin boy named Teal, to Mortimer, who was sailing to his impenetrable fortress on the island Skull Cove. Now the party, being decent human beings, or humanoid beings, obviously wanted to go after Mortimer and rescue the kidnapped child. But Mortimer was already gone, and his ship was too fast to catch up with. Luckily, the party had a trick up their sleeve. That portal network I briefly mentioned at the start of the video. The party made a deal with the Navy that they would use the portal network to transport a massive army to the southwest of the IRC and launch a surprise attack. cutting Mortimer off before he could reach his base. The party made their preparations and waited with the Navy for someone to spot Mortimer. They were contacted with coordinates via sending spell and sailed off towards a storm. They arrived in the middle of a bloodbath. Multiple Navy ships engaged with the rigor mortis, overrun with armies of skeletons summoned by Mortimer. Wind and rain so thick the party could barely stand. A pair of aboleths pounding at the ships and sinking them. A massive battle with dozens of NPCs and enemies. Hey, quick DM tip from me to you. Don't fucking do this! Don't! Just don't! That is too many enemies. Roll20 could not handle it, and more importantly, my human brain could not handle it. It was a cool battle, the party had fun, but it could have run a lot smoother, and I am never doing that again. Anyway, the party went straight for Mortimer, getting off a few good blows on him. Mortimer threw a lightning bolt at Elbin, and Elbin fired back one of his own. The party hurt Mortimer enough for him to retreat, they sunk his ship, and they rescued his hostage. Happy ending! Right? Wrong! Mortimer popped up behind Elbin and wrapped his chains around the sorcerer, dragging him under the waves. The party stared at the riotous waves, unable to do anything to save their leader. DM tip number 2, don't fucking do this either. Don't have a boss separate the party via cutscene. It takes away player agency, and isn't as cool as you think it'll be in your head. The party left the kid with the Navy and rushed to rescue Elbin. They sailed to Skull Cove and snuck through Mortimer's base, stealthily taking out waves of skeleton pirates thanks to the wonderful spell, Pass Without a Trace, which is a tad bit broken. Partway through the dungeon, the party ran into a roper that Mortimer was using as a bartender. This thing gave them more trouble than either fight with Mortimer. Somehow. I don't get it. I mean, 20 AC and grappling is kind of strong at level 5, but not hardest fight in the entire campaign strong. Like, at the end of the campaign, they fought 2 gods at once, and that was easier than the fucking roper. So anyway, while the party was getting wrecked by the ugly hentai monster, Elbin was being held prisoner in Mortimer's quarters. He attempted to escape like 4 times because, to quote, he intended to make things difficult. Mortimer, for his credit, was fairly friendly to Elbin. I mean, he kept him captive and KO'd him every time he tried to escape, which was a bit of a dick move, but he kept him in a nice room and gave him good food. Mortimer didn't want Elbin to think he was a bad guy. After one escape, he pulled back his sleeve, revealing a skull and crossbones tattoo, and told Elbin his tale. There are far worse people than me across the 7 seas. Cruel pirates who enjoy what they do, who are in it either for the money or for their own love of bloodshed. Those men would have cut off your limbs to keep you from running. Those men would have simply killed the children who weren't touched by the storms, instead of ransoming them back. Those men wouldn't feel the shame I feel with every swing of my blade. Have you ever heard of a man named Captain Buckland? No, I wouldn't think so. He died years before you were even born. Buckland, he was a real monster. He ruled over the sea before I did. The things he did, the way he tore people apart, I don't even want to describe it. He went from tower to tower, destroying everything he could. Entire communities wiped out overnight. My home was burned to ashes by Buckland and his beasts. My wife, my wonderful wife Cynthia, I held her in my arms as she died. So I dedicated myself to stopping him, to revenge. I formed a band of adventurers and tracked him to his fortress on the ancient isle, and I killed him. And it didn't make the sorrow go away. That night, as I stared at the sea, a voice spoke to me, a voice belonging to the sea itself, to an ancient queen from below the depths, and she made me understand. There always must be a pirate lord, there always must be a monster to keep the world in fear, to do the necessary evils only a monster may do. The queen gave me an offer, a life of service. In return, she will give back what had been taken from me. She will give back a happily ever after with my Cynthia, once my duty was done. And so I served this queen. I became her devil. I did every evil ask that was ordered of me. I don't know why she wants you, but frankly I do not care. But believe me when I say, I am sorry for what shall happen to you. Full disclosure, in real life that speech was about 1/4 as long and 5% as eloquent. Elbin's response was simple. Will your wife still love you after all that you have done? Which is another really good line. It's not the one the video is about, but that's a really good fucking line. Mortimer's response was similarly blunt. I cannot afford to worry about such things. Not when I have come so far. So let's set the scene for the end of this arc. The moonlight shines down through the eyes of the Skull Cove onto runes carved into the floor, opening this massive black spiral, a portal to God knows where. Elben is standing tied up to the end of a plank. Mortimer is about to push him, when suddenly, the recently roper-slaying party rushes in to save the day. Ripley, the Warlock, and the Rogue charge up the stairs, hitting Mortimer with everything they had. Elben broke free of his bindings and flew over the spiral with tempestuous magic before striking Mortimer with a lightning bolt. But the MVP of the fight ended up being Ren Matarasi, the Ranger. Remember him? I mentioned him at the start of the video. Ren stood by the portal and nailed Mortimer with arrow after arrow buffed by Hunter's Mark and Slayer's Prey. The party was too much for Mortimer to handle. As he ended the final turn of his long life, Quincy Mortimer cast one more terrible spell, Gust, which pushes one medium creature 5 feet away from you. His target, Ripley Matarasi. Ripley fell over the railing towards the portal. Ren saw this scene before him in slow motion, as if he was involved in some sort of turn-based role-playing game. In a split second, he chose to attack. He fired one more arrow, hitting Mortimer in the heart. Ripley fell into the portal, and Ren dived in after her. The party stared at the spiral of black water, unable to see the Matarasis, as Mortimer fell over and clutched his chest. There will always be a pirate lord, he whispered as he died. Cut to Ren. It was underwater and it was cold. Horribly, horribly cold. The pressure, it was like nothing he'd ever felt before. He could feel himself dying as he was crushed like a grape by the weight of the ocean. It was so dark he couldn't see more than a few feet away. But he could see Ripley. He could see her reaching out her arm for his. He reached out, and Ripley was dragged away, and she was gone. He screamed her name, the cold water filling his lungs, but no answer came. Then he saw it, a creature in the distance, slowly moving towards him. She looked humanoid, but only at a distance. As she came closer, he slowly saw the dozens of pale tentacles stretching off of her frame. He saw her, the Queen of the Depths. Ren Matarasi, she said, her words appearing in his mind. You are so far from home, so alone now, for the first time in your life. You did something that you should not have done. You killed a very important man, and now his important duties shall go unattended. This angers me. And then Ren spoke the 10 best words I've ever heard in a D&D game. Please, I'll do anything you want. Just don't hurt Ripley. A smile curled on the Depths Queen's eyeless face. Excellent, she whispered. That exchange remains one of my all-time favorite D&D memories. When you DM, you have to set up these dominoes, these plot threads that knock into each other and pray that they fall down in the right order. And this time, it just worked. Ren's player said the perfect line to respond to the situation. And then the Warlock's player, who had been in the bathroom for a few minutes, came back, saw the image of the Depths Queen in the Discord chat, and said, Cool! Who's the new waifu? Ugh. I actually talked to Ren's player afterwards, and he told me that he, and by extension Ren, had thought the Depths Queen was planning to make Ripley into Mortimer's replacement, which I had never thought of until he pointed it out. Ren's selflessness kept him from seeing the shackles the Depths Queen planned to bind him in. Cut back to the party. They see Ren float to the top of the portal unconscious. They pull him out as the moon moves away, taking the portal with it. As the party tries to shake Ren awake, they notice something strange. A glowing symbol on Ren's forearm that hadn't been there before. The glowing faded away, leaving a tattoo of a skull and crossbones. And there is so much more to this story, but that'll have to wait for another day.